The commonality is that they are buying into a worldview that is at odds with what our institutions, our societal institutions, have identified as sort of that core set of facts that underpin the universe and our understanding of what reality is.
I love this intro. I love the music.
Good.
Okay. And you're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske.
And I'm Rudy Salo.
And this is the podcast where we learn what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a knowledgeable life, a happy life, and using our critical thinking skills. In today's episode, we have something very different. We have never done anything quite like this episode before. Oh, wait, you know what I want to do? I want to give a shout out to Leon of Seize the Moment podcast because our guest was recommended by Leon. And the reason I want to throw that out there is because I get a lot of questions about podcasting. How do you start? How do you do this or that? And Leon and Alan have, on more than one occasion, we've recommended guests to each other for each other's shows. So anybody who wants to get into podcasting, I just want to let you know, like, you meet the coolest people where you do these collaborative efforts, you share. Just when you get into the podcasting space, and if you're nervous, don't worry. There are like so many people who have your back and who support you, and it's very cool. I just wanted to throw that out there at the very beginning. Okay, on that note, now we'll talk about the guest and this different topic.
I think people are going to think I'm a crazy person. Straight up, they're going to be like, Rudy has lost it.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the show, Rudy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the show. Yeah, we talk about what my beliefs are in things that are intangible.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that what I say on this episode, a lot of people are saying, oh, Rudy's just being crazy, he's being funny. Nope, this is crazy Rudy on full display. And why is that, Gwen? What do we talk about?
Well, aliens do come up, and I guess I had misunderstood your thoughts about aliens, so all of that gets corrected. We are going to be talking about ghosts and UFOs and what is a medium and what is tarot reading, the money that's also involved in this endeavor. We are talking with journalist, author of The Ghost Lab, Matthew Hongoltz-Hetling. So, we often ask, okay, where's the philosophical angle? What are our critical thinking skills? And so I'm just going to mention two things at the beginning that come up in the episode. The first one is that there's different kinds of biases that we want to be cognizant of as we're going through work. I realized as I was reading The Ghost Lab, because I don't really participate in this type of belief that he is writing about. He doesn't necessarily either. He's a journalist exploring it. But the idea of in-group bias came up. And in-group bias is when you essentially associate a normalcy to your own group, the people you have something in common with. And anybody outside of that, they are considered to be bizarre or strange or weird, or if they do something, then, it's calls for concern. An in-group bias in this case, I think, would be people who are practicing their own sets of beliefs. And if you really examine your own sets of beliefs or rituals, whether it comes from different types of religion or spirituality, we have a tendency to think, well, that makes perfect sense. And then somebody of another group with a different belief, they say what they believe, and we're like, wow, that's really weird. So I would just caution anybody that when we are talking about this subject with Matt, that even though we're talking about a set of beliefs that might not be akin to what you were growing up with or what you think is quote unquote normal, I would be very cautious about saying that it's weird, because when you look at your own beliefs, chances are you believe something that's a little bit strange and out of the ordinary and not aligned with science at all. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing I want to say is we are dealing with what's called an untestable claim in logic. And so it's essentially there's no proof or evidence, can't be recreated. So an example would be if I say like, oh, I'm doing well today and it's because I prayed last night. Well, that would be an example of an untestable claim. There's no way to recreate that. So when we're talking about this, it is outside the realms of logic and science, but it's all just very interesting. We're an interesting network of people who come together and we have different ways of viewing our purpose, the world, and what happens happens after you die, and are there aliens among us, or we'll never know. That's my spiel about this episode.
Yeah, and I'm just a total weirdo. Enjoy it. Please let us know your thoughts. Please reach out and say Rudy's a nut job. Hashtag Rudy's a nut job.
Okay, and we've also got a fantastic blooper for this one that was just epic, and I'm posting it on our Patreon, so remember to check it out, patreon.com/good is in the details, and I'll link it in the show notes, in addition to Matt's work and all the other good stuff. All right, we're going to be talking about ghosts, tarot, and mediums, and UFOs.
And God.
And God. And God
Remember.
is in there too.
Yeah, a lot of God. So it's gonna be this episode is gonna be called what, Gwen?
It's going to be called what, Gwen?
Yeah.
I think we should come up with something else.
Yeah, totally. No. God, aliens, and the paranormal.
All right, let's get started.
Something that I was thinking about when reading your book, this idea of being interested in ghosts or being a medium or tarot reader, how it's perceived as something that is deviant and outside. But if you really step back, it seems to be on a spectrum. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, or how would you define this interest in spirits and the afterlife? And would you say it's on the same spectrum of people who are in organized religion? The reason I'm thinking about it is this idea of in-group bias, that somebody might be part of a religion. Like, let's say I was brought up Catholic. In Catholicism, there are all sorts of beliefs about saints and miracles and this and that it would be a kind of bias for me to look at somebody who thinks that they're a medium and can talk to the dead and say, that is weird. That it almost seems like it's different from an organized religion, but it's still on the same spectrum. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts so that our listeners can maybe be open-minded and not have that in-group bias and understand that they perhaps also have some sort of a belief about the afterlife and about spirits that is maybe odd or outside of logic, but nonetheless is there. So that somebody who does believe in these things, like in your book, The Ghost Lab, doesn't seem so strange.
Yeah, that is so well framed and such a perceptive question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely found this.
Love this
On the one
guest.
hand, I'm out there and I'm talking to folks. I'm out there talking to folks, and they are telling me about sort of like supernatural events that just sound so bizarre and foreign to my ears. But what you say is absolutely correct. Their beliefs are no more outlandish than the beliefs that are propagated by our major world religions, right? So in the sense of sort of like the idea that sort of strange things are happening sort of beyond the veil, that we can sense in certain cases, but that have not shown up in a laboratory, this is sort of like the essence of organized religion, right? This is the whole enchilada. The whole idea is that, after we die, there is something that remains, a perception, a consciousness that continues in some form and has some impact on things back here on earth. If you call it an angel, it's a very familiar concept. If you call it like a spiritual parasitic dark shadow, then all of a sudden, like you say, those sort of biases cause us to rear up and trigger some defensiveness on our part. But there is also a key difference within the community that I speak about. The key difference is that when you are speaking to folks in an organized religion, there is by and large an agreed upon dogma, an agreed upon set of facts. And so to the scientific community, the agreed upon set of facts within the Christian community is incorrect. But within the church, everyone's sort of like playing with the same set of information, right? And coming to decisions based on information. In the supernatural paranormal communities, the believer community, as they often call themselves, that's not the case. Mutually incompatible truths can be honored and respected and regarded as truth at one and the same time. And this is because the culture within that community places a much higher priority on and emphasis on the individual experience rather than the notion of a shared reality.
I'm thinking about what the role of a medium is. If somebody thinks that that's bizarre, then I can maybe even pull from my own religion, from Catholicism, that part of the practice is the priest literally turns bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. If you really take a look at it, that's a strange thing to believe. So I don't know if it's all that much of a reach if somebody else who's outside of dogma says that they do this. Maybe we can get some definitions. What is a psychic versus a medium versus a tarot reader, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great question. So a psychic, in its sort of most basic terms, is somebody who can communicate with another being, whether that person is alive or dead, sort of telepathically with their mind. Through that supposed power, they can receive insights about the world in which they live. Maybe it is the ability there's like a subcategory of being able to foretell the future, whereas mediums are folks who can communicate specifically with deceased humans, with spirits that once were on the earth, flesh and blood, are now incorporeal, right? And so a medium has the ability to communicate with these things, and sometimes that's psychically through using their minds, and sometimes it's by using a tool or through some other means of communication. And that sort of leads us to tarot reader. A tarot reader is somebody who believes that they can communicate with those spirits by using a tool. Sometimes it's a Ouija board. Sometimes it's a table that they believe the spirits can sort of help them rock back and forth. And in the case of a tarot card, it's a tarot deck where they flip the cards, and those cards sort of help them to channel those inputs that science has not recognized are there.
Would astrology be in that umbrella or no? And numerology?
Yes, it's under the broader umbrella of paranormal beliefs because it relies on supernatural forces that have not been verified by science. There's a belief within astrology that energy from cosmic sources, the stars, is having impacts here on Earth. In that sense, it's the same. Although I think astrology really tends to, at its heart, sort of boil down to sort of like a more cohesive set of information, right? Like the stars are actually up there. Everybody agrees that certain stars are there and that they're in different parts of the heavens at different moments in time. So there's this sort of like very concrete basis with a lot of data that can come out of the placement of those stars at certain moments in time. But sort of like the interpretation of what that means, that gets much more mystical.
And in your research, did you find that there was a common thread of the disposition of somebody who was invested in this? From their age range to location, like there can be all these differences, but was there some essential character trait that lended themselves to invest in this type of thinking or belief?
They're very much not a monolith. There are, however, certain sort of tendencies within the community. If Gallup sort of analyzes what's the sort of socioeconomic, cultural demographic here, they are going to be looking at 22% of Americans who identify themselves as spiritual but not religious, which is a catch-all term that captures most, not necessarily all, but most of these folks. The sort of most common, the median demographic is sort of like maybe a woman in her early 50s who feels a close connection with nature, sort of like a stereotypical earth mother who has a great sense of environmental justice that has landed them sort of on the left in progressive areas politically, traditionally, or at least over the last 50 years or so. That's sort of like the plurality within the community. But the community is actually, much, much broader than that. And it encompasses sort of like Bigfoot enthusiasts, UFO enthusiasts, alien abductees, cryptozoologists, and those sort of subsets tend to skew in different directions demographically. The commonality is that they are buying into a worldview that is at odds with what our institutions, our societal institutions, have identified as sort of that core set of facts that underpin the universe and our understanding of what reality is. And it's a very human belief, by the way. They've done all sorts of studies trying to say, okay, if you believe in ghosts, what does that say about you as a person? Does that mean that you're hearing voices, that you're schizophrenic? Does that mean that you're suffering from depression or anxiety? They really haven't found any sort of causal link or associative link between supernatural beliefs and mental illness or mental dysfunction. What they found is that these are folks who tend to be a little bit more open-minded, perhaps are a little bit more creative than the mean, but not dramatically so. That these are, by and large, just sort of like a cross-section of America.
Yeah, well, there was a line in your book that really stood out to me. You wrote, paranormal beliefs, it turns out it's a feature of the human condition and not a bug. I thought that was so interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, that was sort of a realization that I had during the research and while looking at all of these things. If you look at sort of like the persistence and the broadness of the folks who believe in this, humans are the only animal that really has the capacity to understand science. But we're not necessarily designed to embrace science. We're not designed to be robotic logicians, right? We're designed to have a buy in narrative and in abstract concepts that are rooted in stories and that give us feelings and emotions. And that is what the supernatural beliefs and culture systems offers to us. We believe in science sort of despite the appeal of those things, not because of it. If you are at your heart, sort of more of a science-minded person like I myself am, that carries some, troubling implications, but it's also helped me to understand that this is not something that you can just sort of simply say, well, that's not real, and move on with your day and expect others to follow suit. That's just simply not a realistic expectation for those who are looking for ways to sort of maintain the ability of evidence-based institutions to practice and listen to good science without sort of running into interference from these sorts of belief systems.
Yeah, I appreciated that line because I think that line is what gave me the aha moment. I mean, I am more scientifically based. Like, I don't think I'm on the spectrum at all. But as far as beliefs in these things, but this is the big but of all of that. That line that it's a feature of the human condition, it gave me pause to think of pretty much every person I know in my life. There's some sort of a degree believes in something that is an untestable claim that would fit into this realm, whether it is religion or that other thing. It really hit home. And so then I was wondering, well, what is this feature? Is it a longing and a desire? Is it the now my existential dread from the atheist thinkers is coming into play? I'm a little bit too influenced by thinkers like Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, who would argue that, and even Nietzsche, this idea of holding on to some sort of an afterlife actually devalues the present moment. Because when you remove this idea of something that's out there and after, then you're able to appreciate every single second of your life because there's not this idea that there's something else. That's kind of the realm I'm in. But I also need to accept that there is this longing for more, that there might be a fear that this is it. And there's this quest for, like, we know we didn't create ourselves. How did we get here? There's no rule book. What are we supposed to do? And there's also an incredible amount of sadness when it's inevitable that people will leave our lives. Maybe this is some way to cope, to move on, to continue a relationship with the people that we miss. That's partly what I'm thinking as far as why is it part of the human condition? Because we have this consciousness and this profound sense of love and relationships and a longing for understanding of why we exist and why we are here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all want to know on some level, like, what's the meaning of life? Are we sort of ladybugs here for a brief moment and gone without any sort of real lasting impact or meaning? Or is there sort of like a broader, more meaningful narrative? There are different schools of thought. You just mentioned some of philosophical takes on that, which are certainly valid and probably hew closer to my own personal beliefs. But science has its own sort of offering of what that is, and various branches of science have different nuances within that understanding. Organized religion has another one, and paranormal beliefs have yet another. It's such a grab bag of sorts of ways to grapple with those moments. How do we get up out of bed every morning, aspire to build better versions of ourselves and better communities by relying on one of these worldviews? Which of them can lift us up? The examples that you cite of sort of like the idea that every moment here is made all the more precious by its scarcity and its fleeting nature, that is certainly one good and valid way to do it. It's sort of like a model of perception that we can all appreciate and sort of glob onto. It's not the only one. Organized religion, at least Western organized religion, talks about a glorious afterlife that is sort of like reason makes up for all the downside and toil that we might struggle through here. Paranormal folks, they think that we're going to continue more or less as people, just in a different place. There is a whole sort of mysterious life right on the other side that we will be able to continue to experience. There are certainly 1,000 takes on what exactly that experience is like, but that can be a reason to get out of bed in the morning, to not despair over the shortness and brevity of our existence. Even science has an idea sort of like that. Stephen Hawking posited this whole idea of after the Big Bang, at the end of time, will undergo a cosmic crunch in which gravity will assert itself over everything in the universe, pull it all back into an infinitesimal point. Then we'll see the birth of another Big Bang. And that in fact, this has been going on forever, and that it's going to continue to go on forever. And that every time the universe expands, we explore another sort of version of it. And that in that infinity of possibility, every event that's ever happened will happen again, and new versions of ourselves will be born and live again. And I think that's a very beautiful idea. It's got a scientific underpinning. I don't know if it has enough of a scientific basis of fact to sort of advance as something that we all want to hang our hat on. But those narratives are out there in all of these schools of thought. And I just think that's fascinating, and it demonstrates the human desire to find that meaning that we've been talking about.
Rudy, this life could be the better version of you from another one. Rudy, wait, I want to yield because I know you love like all the alien stuff. So scared of aliens or think aliens are cool? Rudy, what is your take on aliens?
Yeah, I mean, my stance on aliens is that they don't exist, and they are.
I thought you thought they existed.
No, you need to go back and listen to our episodes.
I thought you were terrified of them.
No,
How
no.
can you be
You
scared
think
of
they
something
don't
that doesn't
exist?
exist?
They don't exist. First of all, they don't exist, period.
Okay,
so
oops. All right. I'll mute myself now. Okay.
You should go back and listen to our NASA episode with Tracy. You need to go back and actually listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying aliens do not exist. They cannot exist. In my opinion, it would provide massive amounts of chaos to organize religion to the point where I don't even know if there would be an ordered society anymore. That's how drastic I think the existence of aliens could be on humans. And everyone's like, oh yeah, of course I believe in them. Oh, you're nuts. So I think it would be totally fine. I say bullshit. If there was an actual provable alien race or prove that aliens were there, I really do think that it would cause such questioning of human beings, human history, human views of the future, human views of technology, humans' view of achievement, that society would collapse. That's my opinion, and you will not be able to change it.
That is just what the aliens want you to say, Rudy. No,
He's also a huge
Rudy,
Star Trek fan.
I just want to clarify. Oh yeah, I am on the fringes of that club, and I look to your Star Trek wisdom to help guide us. I just want to clarify, Rudy. When you say there are no aliens, do you mean that there are no aliens in the universe, or do you mean that there are no aliens, sort of like among us, or visiting Earth?
There are no aliens, period.
Wow, why would you think that?
It just doesn't make any sense.
I feel like this must somehow relate to how you think life on Earth evolved, and that you would think it would be sort of like a very unique event across an area as big as the universe.
It is so unique. It is so impossible that life on Earth, now here's where I'll put the asterisks to everything, as we quote unquote know it, would even come into existence except an explanation of some kind of a miracle. We're just close enough to the sun. We just have the perfect conditions to have sustained life and various forms of life, right? Like dinosaurs were here for a while and then shit changed and they weren't here, but the atmosphere changed for other types of evolution of life. So I don't think there is life beyond Earth. And I don't think that there, at least right now in 2025, that there is or can be. Perhaps we haven't discovered something yet because our technology isn't strong enough. But I truly believe in the miracle of Earth and in the miracle of life. And I do think that that is some kind of proof positive of something else out there. Set aside organized religion. I do think that it explains something happened. And that's not to say that something can't happen again when and if this miracle either fails or has reached a point that it needed to. I don't know. That is my deep-seated belief. And all of these people out here, when I say life as we currently know it would end, I'm not saying we would die. I'm saying life as we know it, our existence as we know it, our society as we know it would end if it was proven that aliens existed. I don't think that they've thought about it in the same level that I have. But then again, I'm probably sounding like an arrogant asshole right now, but that's okay.
Well, I think you have to unhitch those two things because, like, the idea that knowledge of aliens would be terrible for society is a very independent thought from whether or not aliens exist somewhere in the universe, right? Like, those are two very separate sorts of ideas, right? Like, climate change, it would be terrible for society, but we don't therefore say, oh, climate change is not real.
Good point. My belief in that there are no aliens is that, you know what, we would have known by now with all the stuff that we've put out there. And if you go back and listen to the Tracy Drain episode, without her agreeing with me explicitly, she absolutely agrees with me on that point.
I myself, look at that same sort of like conditions of life presumption and draw different conclusions. I agree with you, Rudy. I don't think the aliens are here among us, but unlike you, I think I'm a little puzzled as to why that is because, those sort of conditions on Earth that allowed for the evolution of life to start. This is a Goldilocks planet, right? And if you're a Star Trek guy, I'm sure you're familiar with that term. A Goldilocks planet is a planet that's sort of like just close enough to the sun to support what we think of as life. To me, when you consider the fact that there are millions of Goldilocks planets in our universe, it becomes very, very unlikely that life has not started by the same process that it started with here on Earth. It's a divine startup, that there was a supernatural origin to life in the universe, then that is a belief. And that's a belief that's not necessarily what the scientific mainstream thinks, but it is sort of like a mystery and a very commonly held mystery. But across the universe, I would just be very surprised if life didn't evolve on multiple planets. And furthermore, that the timeline for evolution is so broad that there should be civilizations out there that are a million years more advanced than us. So where are they? Why haven't they shown up?
Because they don't exist.
So that's
Because they don't exist. You just proved my point, because they don't exist.
Or maybe they took one look at us and they're like, swipe left.
right. They're waiting for the time. They're waiting for Zamdani to become mayor of New York. So it's a really fascinating sort of like abstract discussion. Now, the folks that I speak to in the book, sort of like the community, they are very in the tank on the idea that they do exist. And one of the sort of troubling things about that belief is that they look at that lack of evidence coming to public light and see conspiracy, right?
Right. And here's the issue with that. And something just came
Yeah.
out just 2 weeks ago. We should probably link this to this episode just so that listeners don't stop listening in droves because they think I'm too wacky to listen to. The government has allowed and used the alien conspiracy narrative in order to cover up for the technology that they are testing at
Yes.
various facilities, not just at Area 51, but throughout the world. The alien cover story is helpful. And there was a congressional reporter about a congressional report I read like 2 weeks ago that says, yes, that is correct. The government has used in the past and continues to use the whole UFO conspiracy alien stuff in order to provide free cover for the tests that they are doing for military technology as well as other types of technology. And I have always believed that.
And if that's true, that is actually sort of a short-sighted strategy by our government. One of the things that I discovered while researching this book is that idea that governments are suppressing true knowledge of alien life, true knowledge of spirits and ghosts, or true knowledge of astrology, that they're covering something up. Science hasn't found an explanation for these things publicly, but in fact, they're actively working to suppress the truth rather than discover the truth. That is sort of like the gateway for all sorts of conspiracy theories, and is also indirectly responsible for the current blooming of institutional trust that has resulted in dramatic cuts to government funding of all sorts of things, including NASA and our space program, including some of those advanced technology research and development projects that otherwise would help us to advance whatever it is that the goals of those research projects are. They're really shooting themselves in the foot if this is what they're doing, because they've inadvertently created a public that now sort of fundamentally rejects the whole idea that government is valuable. And government is the medium that allows them to continue to do the things that they do.
It is mainstream, because I was just thinking about how many films that we enjoy enjoy that include these themes. Like I was just thinking about the film Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey when he still wore a shirt. Even, just the film Ghost, but even like when I read the books of Scooby-Doo to my daughter, how many films all deal with this idea of communicating with ghosts? So it's funny that we treat it like it's fringe, but it is very, very mainstream. It's so much a part of our entertainment that's like right in our face.
Yeah, it's a majority of Americans believe in it. Absolutely. In addition to those sorts of like entertainment properties that you talk about that sort of like more subtly reinforce it or posit narratives that we maybe think reflect reality, there's this whole sort of cottage industry of sort of paranormal themed entrepreneurs. So these are everything from the Ghost Hunters television show and the roughly 120 shows that have followed suit and make their money by convincing people that folks running around a house in the middle of the night with a camcorder running are actually talking to spirits or finding evidence of spirits, to folks who are selling ghost hunting equipment, to the paratourism industry. If you pay $400, you can go sleep in the same room that Lizzie Borden slept in 100 years ago before she murdered her parents with an axe. You can have the same breakfast that Lizzie had the next day. So like there's this very sort of recently created but muscular industry that is capitalizing on those beliefs and selling sort of merchandise and experiences that are related to that belief. And in so doing, they are spreading those beliefs. If you have a bar that's not doing very well, hey, why don't you try telling everyone that it's haunted? And maybe you'll stir some interest and some more folks will come in to buy a drink.
Even Disneyland has the Haunted Mansion ride. It's
That's right.
everywhere.
I took my son to a Santa Claus themed amusement park last weekend. It's all elves and polar slides and all the stuff that you would expect, reindeer. But there's also like the Bah Humbug House. It is like a scary animatronic ride where ghosts will sort of pop out at you as you're going through this ride. There's the one thing in the park that my son did not enjoy.
Yeah, Dickens theme. I've always been fascinated. How is it that one person can write a story that would be recreated and retold over and over in so many different ways? Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
I get that I probably come off a little, a little crazy with my thinking, but I have thought long and hard about this. And you guys were just touching upon something that is really important: the economic benefits to ghosts, the economic benefits to aliens. Think about it. With the town of Roswell, New Mexico, I mean, maybe there's still the national laboratory around there or other type of stuff. But think about how a lot of these towns with the ghost tours and the ghost walking tours and the alien stuff, how much they need this belief for economic reasons. And you know what? I'm all for it. I love going on ghost walks. It's fun. I like to take my kids onto some of them. There's a great one in Nantucket that I've been on. There's the Jack the Ripper walk in London that's really spooky and fun. I like ghost towns, right? I like, the old West towns and stuff. I'm a willing participant in that economy. It distracts people. It gets our imagination going. It encourages creativity. In my opinion, it encourages innovations. When you start thinking about things truly outside of the box and you get your mind used to that, you can build cooler stuff. So I'm all for it. But just because that stuff exists for economic reasons doesn't mean that it's proof positive of the existence of these paranormal extraterrestrial things.
In your research for the Ghost Lab, did you find that within the community of mediums and tarot readers and psychics, that they themselves had their own criteria to distinguish between a charlatan and a hack?
I think there was sort of like an almost universal disgust for folks who are outright sort of profiteering frauds. They all knew, psychics who identify people as being cursed and then try to leverage that into extorting, thousands of dollars from them. They all found that to be highly unethical. There's also sort of like a continuous judgment of how powerful someone's psychic abilities are. How legit is this person? But sort of right along alongside that and parallel to that was this idea that discordant beliefs could be held true. There's a desire to honor the personal experience and a desire to support the person who is having that experience, even if that experience could not be true at the same time as, your own experience or somebody else's experience. And this would come up during sort of like an alien abductee support group where somebody would get up and they would convey that they had been abducted and that the aliens that had abducted them told them in no uncertain terms that a certain truth about, sort of like where the aliens come from and they're the only aliens and this is how it works up there would be followed by somebody else who has been abducted by a different alien with sort of a different theory about what aliens exist up in our skies. One person might say that the government's secretly overrun by lizard people, and the other person might say, no, we were actually sort of like seeded by alien civilizations 10,000 years ago and they haven't done anything since, or 4 billion years ago, or whatever it is. These are radically different views of the universe within that community, but nobody would say you're wrong, get out of here. They were all there to sort of support each other. And so I think that is an interesting aspect of these communities.
Let's wrap up with this. Embarking on this project for the Ghost Lab, what is something that you learned or something that, as you were working this and researching it, a direction that you went in was there a direction you went in that you didn't expect? Did it make you have more of an appreciation or empathy or thought about the people who this is a big part of their lives? I'm really curious about you personally, what you got out of it, and then putting the book together, what would you like for other people to get out of it?
When I started the book, I came very much from I'm a skeptic. The folks who have these beliefs are either stupid or they're lying or they're crazy. I sort of assign them one of those 3 buckets of categories in my head. Throughout the course of writing the book, I realized that the people with those beliefs are none of those things, that they've seen evidence for what they believe. And the human sort of machine is a flawed enough entity that you can't really blame them in many cases for believing these things because they are as compelling to them. After my father dies, I have an experience with my father's ghost. That's all the evidence I need, right? That's where a lot of them are coming from. And it's just very, very understandable and relatable. And so I came out of it sort of believing that people with these beliefs need to be sort of respected and that as a matter of practicality, our evidence-based institutions, and I'm thinking hospitals, I'm thinking medical clinics, I'm thinking scientific research organizations, I'm thinking state boards of practitioners for sort of therapy adjacent services and medicine adjacent services. They need to create spaces for these communities and for these belief systems that will create a sort of class of stakeholders within those communities that will uphold society and the functions of society rather than sort of throwing them out there into this sort of nebulous free market that will eventually turn all of them against government. I'll cop the NRA slogan. The only thing that can stop a bad psychic with a cursed amulet is a good psychic with an amulet of blessings, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to have pathways that allow people to express these views and to conduct these practices to the extent that they are harmless as a means to combat the expressions of these views that are dangerous. And that was sort of my biggest takeaway. And I hope that readers will read it and mostly just enjoy getting a window into some of the deep, quirky pockets of this community that I'm sure they will not have experienced before. And I hope that they'll enjoy it and walk away with a little bit more knowledge and thought about how this might affect their lives.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really fun, this is a new topic for us. This was a fun topic. I really appreciate this insight because it gave, like I said, it gave me some aha moments, that idea that it's a feature, not a bug of the human condition. That was my favorite line, I think, in your book. I loved it.
Yeah, this is great, Matt. I'm glad we're having these discussions. Sure, I could have been a little bit more fun here and a little bit more less serious, but I'm very serious about this. There are no aliens. Period. I want to end on that note. I think it's very, very important that we drive that point.
Rudy has spoken.
There's no form of wet blanket that is somebody speaking their mind and telling us what their beliefs are. I find that to be not at all an offensive or a bad idea. I think speaking from the heart like that is a wonderful, wonderful aspect, and I hope you never give it up.
Good is in the Details is produced by Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. If you're enjoying this episode and you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please scroll down to the bottom and hit that 5-star review. And you can get more content, join our book club, get all the behind the scenes stuff by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/goodisinthedetails. You can get a free copy of Philosophy Unplugged when you sign up for the second tier. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, avonmoreinc.com. It is everything you need for your next bridge party. If you like bridge or you know somebody who likes bridge, you got to check out avonmoreinc.com. They have everything you need for your next bridge party. Let them know Good is in the Details sent you. You can check us out on Instagram, Good is in the Details Pod. You can email us, goodisinthedetailspod@gmail.com. We're also taking sponsors for our upcoming episodes, and we love your feedback. Okay, until next time, bye.
You were recommended by Leon. You were on his podcast.
Right.
Oh shit! Wait, I just forgot the name.
Yeah,
That part I'll
Seize
edit
the
out.
moment, guys. You guys got to seize the moment.
That will be edited. All right, maybe we'll keep it. Sorry, Leon. Leon's a treasure. Okay, Leon and Alan.